Imagine being married to a king who could rewrite the laws of an entire kingdom just to be rid of you, where a whisper of failure or simply giving birth to the wrong gender could mean death. The story of Henry's wives is not just about romance gone wrong. It is about power, desperation, and the terrible cost of ambition. For the 6 women who married Henry VIII, this was their reality. These women were not merely wives, they were vessels, political instruments, sacrifices on the altar of dynasty. Henry VIII ascended the throne in 1509 at just 17 years old. Young, athletic, and charismatic, he seemed like the perfect king, but beneath the charm lurked a gnawing fear. The Tudor dynasty was fragile, built on the battlefield barely a generation earlier. One thing haunted Henry above all else: he needed a son, a legitimate male heir to secure the throne. Without one, civil war could return. Without one, everything could crumble. This obsession would define his reign, and it would destroy the lives of 6 women. Catherine of Aragon. Henry's first wife was Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess. Their marriage in 1509 was meant to strengthen England's alliance with Spain. Catherine was everything a queen should be: educated, cultured, deeply religious, and fiercely loyal. She even served as regent while Henry campaigned in France, overseeing an English victory at the Battle of Flodden in 1513. But there was one devastating problem. Between 1510 and 1518, Catherine endured at least 6 pregnancies. In 1511, she delivered a healthy son, Henry, Duke of Cornwall. The kingdom erupted in celebration. 52 days later, the boy was dead. She gave birth to stillborn children. She lost infants. Each pregnancy raised hope. Each death crushed it. In February 1516, Catherine finally gave birth to a surviving child, Mary, a daughter. As the years passed and Catherine aged, Henry's frustration turned to desperation. By 1518, it became clear there would be no more children. Henry convinced himself their marriage was cursed. He claimed marrying his brother's widow had been a sin. He demanded an annulment from the Pope. Catherine refused. She fought back in court. She defended her honor. But Henry was done waiting. In 1533, he broke England away from the Catholic Church and cast Catherine aside. She died 3 years later on January 7, 1536, alone and exiled, still believing herself to be Henry's true wife. What Henry wanted from Catherine, a son. What she gave him, loyalty and a daughter who would become Queen Mary. Anne Boleyn, the catalyst for revolution. Anne Boleyn was ambitious, intelligent, witty, and unafraid to challenge Henry. When he pursued her in the late 1520s, she refused to become his mistress. She set her terms: marriage, nothing less. Henry was obsessed. For 7 years he courted her. He defied the Pope. He tore England from Rome, all to marry Anne Boleyn. They wed in secret in January 1533. Anne was already pregnant. In September, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. Surely a son would follow. But Anne suffered losses. She miscarried in 1534. In January 1536, on the same day, Catherine of Aragon was buried. Anne miscarried again, this time a boy. Henry's patience shattered. She had promised him sons. She had cost him everything: his relationship with Rome, his reputation, the loyalty of many subjects. And for what? Another daughter? Within months, Thomas Cromwell orchestrated her downfall. Anne was arrested on May 2, 1536, and accused of adultery with 5 men, including her own brother. The charges were almost certainly false. On May 19, 1536, Anne was beheaded at the Tower of London. She was likely around 35 years old. 2 days before her execution, her marriage was annulled as if it had never existed. What Henry wanted from Anne, a son and a fresh start. What she gave him, a revolution, a daughter who would become Elizabeth I, and a legacy written in blood. Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour was everything Anne was not. Quiet, modest, obedient. She knew exactly what Henry wanted: submission, gentleness, and no drama. Henry married Jane just 11 days after Anne's execution on May 30, 1536. In May 1537, Jane announced she was pregnant. On October 9, Jane went into labor. It lasted 3 days and 2 nights, a grueling ordeal. Finally, on October 12, 1537, Jane gave birth to a son, Edward. The male heir Henry had waited nearly 30 years to hold. England erupted in celebration. At last, the Tudor dynasty was secure. Jane seemed well after the birth. But on October 16, 4 days later, she suddenly became very ill. Fever, signs of infection. Henry rushed to her bedside. The doctors tried everything. On October 24, 1537, 12 days after giving birth, Jane died at Hampton Court Palace. She was around 28 years old. The cause was puerperal fever, a bacterial infection common after childbirth in the Tudor era. Henry was devastated. Jane had given him what no other wife could: a living son. She was the only one of his 6 wives to be buried beside him. In death, she became his true wife. What Henry wanted from Jane: a son. What she gave him, Prince Edward and her life. And of Cleves, the political mistake. After Jane's death, Henry waited over 2 years before remarrying. But England needed alliances. His chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, arranged a marriage with Anne of Cleves, a German princess. It was purely political. Henry sent the court painter, Hans Holbein, to paint Anne's portrait. When he saw it, Henry was pleased. But when Anne arrived in England in January 1540, everything went wrong. Henry met her unexpectedly, barging into her chambers in disguise as part of a courtly game. Anne didn't recognize him and showed no interest. Henry was furious. He felt rejected, humiliated. He complained bitterly that she was not as beautiful as her portrait suggested. The wedding went ahead on January 6, 1540, but Henry could not bring himself to consummate it. Within 6 months, he sought an annulment. The grounds: non-consummation and a pre-contract Anne had supposedly made years earlier. Anne agreed without protest. Perhaps she understood that resistance could cost her life. In exchange, Henry gave her a generous settlement, castles, estates, and income that made her one of the wealthiest women in England. Anne never returned to Germany. She lived quietly in England and outlived Henry and all his other wives, dying on July 16, 1557. What Henry wanted from Anne: a political alliance and heirs. What she gave him: an embarrassing failure and, ironically, her survival. Catherine Howard. By 1540, Henry was 49 years old, obese, and in constant pain. Then he met Catherine Howard, a teenager, likely around 17, with auburn hair and a lively spirit. Henry called her his rose without a thorn. Catherine was Anne Boleyn's first cousin. Henry married her on July 1540, less than 3 weeks after annulling his marriage to Anne of Cleves. At first, Henry showered Catherine with gifts and affection, but Catherine was young, inexperienced, and perhaps deeply unhappy. Before marrying Henry, Catherine had relationships with 2 men, Henry Manox and Francis Dereham. She never disclosed these. Then, during her marriage, she began meeting secretly with Thomas Culpeper, a courtier in Henry's inner circle. In late 1541, the truth came out. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer informed the king. Henry was shattered. He wept. He raged. For the first time, people said he seemed truly heartbroken. Catherine was arrested on November 14, 1541. Culpeper and Dereham were tried and executed in December. Parliament passed a bill declaring it treason for an unchaste woman to marry the king. On February 13, 1542, Catherine was brought to the scaffold. She was so weak she had to be supported. Moments later, she was beheaded. She was likely around 18 or 19 years old. What Henry wanted from Catherine: youth, and perhaps one last chance at more sons. What she gave him: betrayal and a broken heart. Catherine Parr, the survivor. By 1543, Henry was 52 years old, morbidly obese, and barely able to move. He had executed 2 wives and discarded 2 others. Few women would have willingly married him, but Catherine Parr did. Catherine was 31, educated, and twice widowed. When Henry proposed, she accepted out of duty. Henry married Catherine on July 12, 1543. This time, he wasn't looking for passion or children. What Henry needed was a companion, a caretaker. Catherine excelled. She developed close relationships with Henry's children, Mary Elizabeth and Edward. She helped reconcile Henry with his daughters. She oversaw their education. She became the first English queen to publish work under her own name, but Catherine's religious beliefs nearly cost her everything. In 1546, conservative enemies convinced Henry to have her arrested for heresy. Catherine learned of the plot just in time. She went to Henry, humbled herself, and convinced him she had only debated theology to distract him from his pain. Henry was appeased. Catherine survived. On January 28, 1547, Henry VIII died. Catherine Parr had outlived him. 6 months later, she married Thomas Seymour, the man she had loved years earlier. In 1548, Catherine became pregnant. On August 30, she gave birth to a daughter, Mary. Days later, on September 5, Catherine died of puerperal fever. She was 36 years old. What Henry wanted from Catherine: comfort and stability in his final years. What she gave him: care, loyalty, and a peaceful end. The cost. In the end, Henry got his son, but only for a moment. It was the daughters he tried to erase who went on to shape England's future. He bent the church, rewrote the law, and shattered 6 marriages in pursuit of control. Yet history chose the women, and in that, he failed. The king who could change the law could not outrun his legacy. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe.